Dragon's Dogma 2 had a lot of previews last night with a lot of different creators, and we got a bunch of new looks at the Mystic Spearhand vocation and the Magic Archer vocation. We also got a look at different monsters and their behaviors in the middle of combat, and conversely we got a look at what the performance of the game looks like on PS5, as well as some other new bits of information. There have also been some recent articles released with interviews with Itsuno detailing what the final product of Dragon's Dogma 2 will look like despite what we see in these previews. And admittedly, some of the news I think is a bit disappointing, but we're going to go through all of it so we can lay out what exactly we're going to get here in March 22nd. Let's start off with the biggest elephant in the room, that would be the frame rate on PS5. Now before we get started in this section, it's important to note that the build that was played during this preview is what's known as a vertical slice. A vertical slice is essentially a benchmark of a particular product that contains all the layers needed for a final product to run, but is only in the context of a smaller portion. So if you think of it like a layer cake, you're essentially taking one slice of that entire layer cake and saying this will represent what the entire layer cake is. So while it's not 100% what the final product will look like, it is a decent representation. So that's what we have with the previews of Dragon's Dogma 2 on PS5, and that's what we're looking at right now. As we can see, the graphical fidelity is absolutely gorgeous. It looks like a good game. However, when we go to the performance side of things, we have some mixed reviews. This one from Prod.
Now, like I said, we were playing on PS5, not on PC, and the game ran pretty damn great. Naturally, this game has a couple of issues when it comes to the frame rate. For example, whenever you get into some really intense situations, in small corridors especially, you'll definitely notice a little bit of a frame drop, but I remember I was a little bit worried that this game was going to be like 30 FPS on console. Definitely not the case. Usually runs at 60, of course, like any console game that is intense and looks great. It's going to have its moments where it dips.
And this one being a stream from Ouroboros talking about the performance.
How's the frame rate? Really bad. really bad. Played on PS5. Was it at least a stable 30? Nope. It was like 20. They told me they were gonna fix it. They said, listen, this is not the final version. Let people know it's not the final version. Because I asked them, I was like, ooh, the frame rate's really rough. Like, is this the final version? They were like, no, it's going to be better in the final version. I said, okay. All right, I'll let people know, but I'm going to let people know that you told me that.
Now, in both of these instances, it should be noted that the build that they got of Dragon's Dogma 2 is still an early build. At least that's what Capcom is reassuring them for. But I think the best breakdown of this particular build comes from IGN, which actually has an FPS counter.
It should be noted that I am playing a version which Capcom clearly states is still in development, and it's not equivalent to the final product. But in this build on PlayStation 5, Dragon's Dogma 2 was averaging around 31 frames per second, with dips during heavy combat moments, while playing with the PS5 set to output at 4K. I did not get to test at lower base resolutions or with variable refresh rate turned on during my time to see if that had a positive impact on performance.
So as we can see, in the normal overworld, you do get frame rates of an average of 31, with it dipping upwards of 34. However, in the middle of heavy action, it can dip down to about 24 FPS. Now, it should be noted that the output of the PS5 and of Dragon's Dogma 2 in this instance was 4K, so we're looking at 4K at 30 FPS uncapped. It should also be noted in the preview that there was no option to turn off any graphical settings, however, that will be coming later in the final product. Now, initially, about a month ago, I made a video debunking the whole 30 FPS lock on consoles argument, and this was based on information that we knew at the time. We had a singular tweet from PC Focus. We then had a preview from PlayStation State of Play, which showed footage captured from the PS5 that seemed to display footage upwards of 60 FPS with dips into 40 to 50 FPS. So at the time, the rumor seemed to be fake news. This was further backed up by a tweet from Itsuno himself stating that the frame rate would be uncapped. However, what we know now is that the truth is somewhere in the middle. When interviewed by Game Informer, Hideaki Itsuno used a translator to say that we're aiming to go at around or higher than 30 FPS, and that is for consoles as well. There are some functions you can turn on and off, but there aren't multiple sets of options that you can change at once. But yeah, frame rate will come uncapped for all consoles. Itsuno also echoed this in an interview with Reno Gazette-Journal as well. So while the frame rate is not locked at 30 FPS and it can go higher, there are multiple instances where it dips below 30 FPS in the previews that we have seen, especially in higher action shots. So with that being said, it does appear like console gameplay will hover around 30 FPS with possibilities of dips or also improved frame rate in certain instances of the game. Again, it should be noted that this is not the final product of the game, so the end result could either be better or worse. We just do not know at this point. It should also be noted as well that at this time Itsuno has said that we shouldn't be expecting a preset that prioritizes performance over visual fidelity, meaning that there probably will not be a performance mode on PS5. That being said, if it's too much of a pain point for you, then I understand. 60 FPS has been the standard for gaming for a little bit now, and while I personally do not have a problem with 30 FPS as long as it's stable, I do know that a lot of players do. It's because of potential news like this that I did not pre-order the game just yet. In fact, I probably won't pre-order any games in the future. I learned my lesson during the Cyberpunk 2077 fiasco, and I just don't pre-order on principle. But anyway, if you'd like to clown me in the comments about how I was half wrong about a 30 FPS lock on consoles, then go right ahead, that's fine. And obviously for PC users like myself, it will depend on the specs that you have with your particular PC. I have seen rumors that it's heavily determinant on what kind of CPU you have as opposed to GPU, but we don't have any confirmation on that. We also got a bit of disappointing news with Vocations. It turns out that there will be only 10 Vocations. So it was previously theorized by myself and many other people that there would be somewhere in the realm of maybe 12, 14, or in my case 18 Vocations, and this was based on a similar color wheel design that is borrowed over from the first game. And mainly this speculation came from the fact that the Trickster has two completely different colors, with pink and purple being its hybrid vocation, but it turns out that that actually didn't really mean anything, and that Trickster just has these two random colors that just are there. And we have confirmation from Itsuno that the 10 Vocations that were announced are the 10 that will be in the final release, and that there are no plans to release any further ones at this time. I have seen a bit of hopium go around that because the interviewer asked this in terms of the base game that there would be DLC Vocations. Personally, I think that's probably a pretty good idea as far as where additional Vocations could come from, but there is no confirmation on that, so at this point we don't know. And personally, I'm a bit disappointed with this one. I think that they could have let us down easy early on by saying that colors don't really mean much, especially when they made a big deal about hybrid Vocations and advanced Vocations and the colors seemingly being linked to one another. Obviously, the Mystic Spear Hand having red and blue means that it's getting some red traits from Fighter and some blue traits from Mage. Same thing with Magic Archer, you have blue from Mage and you have yellow from Range, and that seems to make sense. So for the Trickster Vocation, obviously the same line of thinking goes. There would be something from a pink Vocation and something from a purple Vocation, but sadly that it's not the case and they're just two random colors. So I'm personally disappointed with this one. I know a lot of people are as well, but at the end of the day you get 10 Vocations, 2 of which are completely different from anything that we've played before, and they both look really fun in their own way, so it's not exactly a complete loss. However, as many of you know who have been following the channel for a while, I'm a big Mystic Knight fan from Dragon's Dogma 1, and that Vocation has no chance of returning. In an article with Eurogamer, he explains that to replace the Mystic Knight, he basically took the components of what Mystic Knight was and spread them out among different Vocations. And this is why we've been seeing skills like Holy Furor on the Magic Archer Vocation and the Mace Weapon on the Fighter Vocation. And furthermore, we also have some aspects of Mystic Knight being placed directly onto the Fighter Vocation, including a core skill Enchanted Counter, which is borrowed over from Mystic Knight. So again, while it is a bit disappointing that we didn't get more than 10 after 12 years of waiting, and Thief and Archer don't actually have any advanced Vocations, the Vocations that we did get still seem pretty fun, especially Mystic Spear Hand. And finally, the last piece of disappointing news that we got was about armor and clothing. And essentially what Itsuno said when talking to the Reno Gazette-Journal is that he has changed the armor system and simplified it with the goal of providing more variety with different armor sets. So in the previous game, in Dragon's Dogma 1, you could equip a clothing layer underneath your armor layer, which was something that you could do in past games of old. And the reason he's removed it is because a lot of the time times the clothing portion of this setup would often be overlooked or just buried under layers of armor. So while in a lot of cases many players use this for what's called Fashions Dogma, where you would just look the best, it appears that now that's done away with, and instead we're getting more variety of whatever armor you can wear in the endgame. And he did make a specific comment about this, saying that in Dragon's Dogma 1 a lot of in-game armor looked the same. People would wear a lot of the same sets, and this was because all the same sets were basically the strongest in Dragon's Dogma 1. But now he wants to make it to where there's more variety, so instead of giving us a clothing layer, he's now making a bigger variety of armors that we can wear that's viable for in-game. Now there's still a possibility here that what he means is that there are still armor sets that look like clothing. I mean, if you look at the Trickster vocation, for example, you can see that they still have robes, and the sorcerers also have robes as well. And of course the warfare vocation can pretty much equip whatever it wants. So there are different opportunities for you to still have Fashions Dogma. It's just not the same as it was in Dragon's Dogma 1. And for those that ask, it's unclear whether or not there will be a transmog option in Dragon's Dogma 2. Whenever this question was brought up, Itsuno just didn't answer it. Given that question was buried inside of another question, and he did answer the first part of that question, but we still don't have an answer for whether or not transmog is a thing. So anyway, this information is probably the least disappointing out of all the three that I've provided, but I did want to give you all some caveats, as these are the main three complaints that I've been hearing from a lot of people on the internet as far as what they don't like about Dragon's Dogma 2 and the previews that we got. Obviously, the news about 30 FPS on consoles being uncapped and somewhat stable but also unstable is something that a lot of players have a breaking point with. And you know, if that's a deal breaker for you, then that's completely fine. We all play games for our own reasons. If 30 FPS is too low for you, then please go look elsewhere. And of course, this only applies to PS5 and Xbox Series X. We can still expect to see heightened performance as long as your PC can handle it. As far as vocations go, it is what it is. We got 10, so we'll have fun with the 10 that we have. And for lack of clothing options in favor of armor, it's just done differently. I don't think that this is a huge disappointment, but obviously some people do, and I figured I'd provide it here. So anyway, thank you guys for watching. Please let me know what you think down in the comments, and I will talk to you guys real soon.